Folks, I'm here today with Saikat Chakrabarti, a progressive Democrat running for Congress in Nancy Pelosi's district in San Francisco, California. The 11th congressional district is a seat that's been held by Pelosi for many decades, but with her retiring at the end of the term, it opens up the door for a progressive who previously served as the campaign manager and chief of staff for AOC. Chakrabarti helped author the Green New Deal and looks to bring leftist change to Washington. Thanks for being here, and how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on here, Josh.
Of course. Thanks for being here. So, first of all, we saw AOC posted a poll that had her beating JD Vance in a hypothetical 2028 presidential race. What'd you make of her posting that? And what does that say about the strength of the progressive movement right now?
I mean, I thought it was funny, and also like I don't know if you saw her response after, where there's some press reporters that caught her outside the Capitol steps, and she was like, "Yeah, let the record show I'd stomp them," and she's right. I think right now what's going on is in this country, people are looking for some sort of bold, dramatic change when it comes to the economy, and I think that's ultimately why Donald Trump won in 2024. And after 4 years of Trump, it's basically his theory of how to fix the economy will have completely failed. People's lives will have gotten way worse. But that desire to change the system isn't going to go away because everybody agrees that the economy is rigged, the political system is rigged, and the two things are tied. So we're basically going to have given MAGA a shot. They'll have failed. And I think on the Democratic side, we've got to present our own vision of how to do these big structural changes. And that's what AOC stands for. It's not going to be enough to have some moderate Democrat stand up there, calling for some little reforms around the edges. Everybody knows that's not going to fix the system. So that's, I think, basically what that poll shows is people are looking for fighters and people are looking for real, big ideas. And that's what AOC is all about.
Now that Representative Nancy Pelosi announced she'll be retiring from Congress, what was your reaction to that, and how does that change the race and the campaign in your mind?
Yeah, I announced my campaign back in February when Nancy Pelosi was still planning to run for re-election, and it turned out that she actually had filmed two videos. She had actually filmed a video talking about running for re-election and a video calling for talking about her resigning. And in our campaign, we've had a lot of energy since I started. We did our office opening party back in July. We thought, a couple hundred people would show up, but about 500 people showed up. And then we did a rally, about 800 people showed up. This is about a year out from the election. And we've already knocked on over 100,000 doors. We've had thousands of volunteers come out and join this campaign. And I think Speaker Pelosi, she saw that energy and she sort of realized that if she wanted to run for re-election, she'd have to run a real campaign, and chose to step down, which honestly, I give her a lot of credit. Most people in Congress don't choose to step down. They hang on for way too long. So that really showed some leadership. From my perspective, the race hasn't changed all that much, though. The folks that I'm running against right now, they're still from the political establishment. They're politics as usual folks. One of my challenges is a big corporate back Democrat. And they're going in, their theory of how to change things in Congress is to go in, build a long career, rise up in seniority, and then eventually do what? I don't know. I believe we've got to change a whole bunch of Democratic Party establishment. We need new leaders to go in there who are going to take no corporate money, no lobbyist money, and who are going to work together to actually pass things like Medicare for all, to actually pass things like universal child care. And that's going to mean not just fighting the Republicans, but also fighting a lot of the Democratic Party establishment. And so that's what my campaign is about. And I'm talking to other progressive candidates who are running all around the country to try to start building that team now, because that's what it's going to take. And we have to be clear. It's going to be a fight against the big corporate interests that send so much money our way to try to keep things like Medicare for all from happening. But we got to take on that fight. It's a different type of politics.
Yeah, the conversation around accepting corporate PAC money, especially APAC money, has become a non-negotiable for a lot of voters. Do you think the Democratic Party, the establishment Democrats, understand that frustration, or are they at risk of repeating the same mistakes?
The establishment doesn't understand it, and that's why I think they need to be replaced. It's when it comes to taking APAC money, corporate money, it completely warps their worldview about what they should be running on and who they're fighting for. Look, like most people who go to Congress, they spend 6 to 8 hours a day calling big donors for money, and that shapes everything about what they think is possible, who they're fighting for, what they should be doing, and you end up with these really distorted votes. Like just now, last week, we saw a bipartisan agreement on increasing the defense budget. We just passed a $900 billion defense bill, and 115 Democrats voted for that. And when you look at who the people are that voted for that and who the people are that take the most defense money into their campaigns, it's like a one-to-one correlation, right? But on the other hand, like if you look at the polling on this stuff, only 3% of Democrats and only 16% of Republicans want a bigger defense budget. So you end up with this Congress that's completely out of step with where the people are at. And all I'm calling for is let's have people run for Congress who actually represent the views of people rather than the views of these big donors that are sending so much money into these campaigns. But that's not going to happen on its own, largely because of the Democratic Party, people like Hakeem Jeffries, all the leadership in there, they don't see any way to win by just representing the will of the people. They believe the only way to win campaigns is by taking in tons and tons of foreign lobby money, corporate money, and that's the only way they see any sort of viability. I mean, it's honestly the fact that the way you get up in seniority in a lot of these committees inside Congress is by your fundraising prowess, is how much money you can raise, right? So that whole style of politics has to change. I spent some time in there trying to convince Democrats that they're wrong. They're not willing to move on their own. So I do think we have to replace them.
Absolutely. Let's talk about a few specific issues. While working with AOC for many years, you helped write the Green New Deal. How frustrating has it been for you watching the Trump regime basically at every opportunity to do something productive, they do the complete opposite, and they're trying to set us backward years on that issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's been extremely frustrating, especially to see a lot of the programs that were starting to take off. I mean, we actually did see manufacturing investment go up under Biden because of the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a direct result of the Green New Deal. Because something a lot of people don't realize about the Green New Deal was our strategy there with the Green New Deal wasn't necessarily to pass this resolution. It was to really change the entire conversation around climate. We wanted everybody running for president at the time to go way bigger on climate and to talk about climate change as not just a crisis, but a huge opportunity to create this whole new high wage, clean economy that could create tons and tons of high wage jobs and rebuild manufacturing in this country. And the hypocrisy here is, of course, the way we did that was AOC did the sit-in in Nancy Pelosi's office. It created this big moment in the media, and everybody running for president responded, including Joe Biden with Build Back Better. And that turned into Inflation Reduction Act and actually passed. And that wasn't everything I wanted, but it was still the largest investment in climate change in history. And what I was going to say, the hypocrisy of this is that was resulting in manufacturing jobs going up. And then Trump campaigned on rebuilding manufacturing. He comes in, he slashes all these programs, and we're seeing manufacturing jobs tank under Trump. And I think Democrats need to call him out on that, right? I don't see enough people actually talking about the fact that Trump has been the worst president for manufacturing in this country in the last decade. But I think the flip side of this is, again, these underlying economic concerns, they're not going away. And Trump was right to campaign on rebuilding manufacturing, and everyone will have realized that he failed at it. So it does create this opportunity for Democrats to, fully embrace industrial policy and a way to actually rebuild our means of making a living in 2028 and then actually deliver. And we need a real plan to deliver. And that's actually what I've been working on at my think tank at New Consensus. We have this very comprehensive detail plan called the Mission for America. It's kind of like a sequel to a Green New Deal with all the details filled in. I don't always campaign on because thousands of pages of policy, but it's a plan for how do we actually rebuild, or build a whole new clean, high wage, upgraded economy and bring manufacturing back to this country.
Absolutely, yeah, and we want to compete too with innovation and other countries like China. They're going to be building sustainable projects that are going to outperform us if we're acting like a fossil using these finite resources.
Yeah.
You've made a good amount of money through tech. I want to make sure the voters can trust you. So here's a kind of silly question: are you AI first or humanity first?
Absolutely humanity first. My entire view, a lot of what I talk about is we used to have a society where we as a people used to determine what the economy was for, right? And that was sort of what we did through the New Deal, through the World War II mobilization. We actually had goals as a country of saying we want to get people out of poverty, we want to guarantee jobs to people, we want to guarantee healthcare to people, and we'll use our economy, and our markets towards that goal. And then Reaganism to me was really going backwards on that. It was the tail wagging the dog. We said, actually, what we should do is hand over the reins of our economy to the corporations, have profit be the only guiding motive for anything, and let's see where that goes. And that has been a disaster. And I think AI is really supercharging that experiment where right now, it's not just about AI. We've got, a handful of CEOs who are essentially determining the future of our entire society because AI could wipe out half of our workforce. Some of them are even saying might wipe out humanity, right? Why should a handful of CEOs have the power to decide that? They shouldn't. That should be us as a people. So my entire view is we need to figure out how to introduce AI and technologies like this into our society in a way that we will be better for people, where the share of the wealth will go to people, not just this handful of CEOs, where it makes people, makes us be able to do things like have a 4-day work week. If we're going to have all this productivity, why are people working harder and longer hours? That makes absolutely no sense. I often compare the introduction of AI or AI here to the way automation came into our car manufacturing sector. And if you look at how we did it versus Germany. So in Germany, they have corporations, government, and labor all on the boards of their big auto manufacturers. And the result of that, and they also make these 5 and 10-year kind of industrial plans. The result of that was after about 10 years of automation in their car manufacturing sector, German auto workers made about double the wages of their American counterparts. They also made more cars per capita, and they had more automation than America did in their car manufacturing. So that's the kind of thing we could be doing, but it's going to require a whole different approach to how we think about not just AI, but our society. I think we have to actually answer these bigger questions now. What is our economy for? What's our country for? Who is our economy for, right? Like, what are our goals as a country? And I think the answer cannot just be profit for Sam Altman and Elon Musk.
Yeah, and we've already heard Trump's Secretary of Education call AI A1. I'm sure you would agree that our current government is totally clueless about the danger and the power of AI. What would be one specific action you would take entering Congress to immediately try to put some guardrails up?
Yeah, I think right now, I mean, the in the immediate term, I mean, we got to be telling these AI companies they're building data centers. You got to bring your own energy, your own water, and improve the communities you're building in, not just use data centers as a way to drive up everybody's electricity costs. I think we got to regulate things like AI right now making health insurance decisions and denying people claims without any recourse. That kind of thing should just be outright banned. I think we should be banning the interaction of chatbots with children, right? And that goes beyond AI. I think we need to have way higher restrictions on how children interact with social media and a bunch of these big tech companies. But I think at a larger level, right now, I think there's a big bubble in AI, right? And that this bubble might pop. And when that bubble pops, Sam Altman and all these CEOs are going to come to the government with their hand held out asking for a bailout. And we should not give them a bailout. And what I think we should do instead is buy up their data centers on pennies on the dollar and have us as a people and the government actually own these data centers, own this infrastructure, and create a public option for AI so that we can actually control our destinies. And so we can decide what that AI is going to be used for. And yeah, then we can use it for the good stuff like detecting cancer earlier and not for the slop feeds that are coming out of OpenAI just to addict us, all the social media and these AI feeds.
Speaking of AI, we know ICE has been working in tangent with Palantir to track Americans, surveil the entire population as they, hunt down immigrants. Just last night, in Trump's amazing speech, he said that 30 million immigrants came to this country, and that's why housing is so expensive. Do you think that's why housing is expensive, or what is the real problem when it comes to affordability?
Yeah, no, that's not why housing is expensive. And I mean, one thing that's really crazy about that argument is they somehow, if you ever tried to buy a home, which I know more and more people can't do today, I mean, they ask you for all the stuff they ask you for. It is very difficult for an undocumented immigrant to provide because you need like 5 years of employment history. You need all this documentation that, especially in this environment, I don't think undocumented people are able to do. But regardless, the reason housing is expensive right now is twofold. One, we do have a supply problem. We're not building enough housing. But also the reason we're specifically not building enough affordable social housing. And we just don't have a lot of these elements in our government that we used to have that other countries with affordable housing have. Things like being able to build social housing, things like public finance to actually build out this housing. These are these tools that we should be able to use to build tons and tons of affordable housing that are actually, that people can actually afford to live in and rent and own and buy, because we don't actually think of housing as infrastructure in our society, which it is. And that's what I think we should be doing. We should be planning out our housing development like it's roads or bridges, and then actually financing and building that housing at an affordable level. Right now, housing is entirely kind of based on these boom and bust cycles in the markets, and we rely entirely on private developers. And the result of that is, right here in San Francisco, where our housing crisis is really bad, you end up with, tens of thousands of housing units that are actually approved to get built, but they're not getting built because the cost of financing is too high, the cost of materials is too high, inflation is too high, and so the developers are saying, the only way we're going to be able to build this housing is if rents go up, and that's unacceptable in the current moment we're at. So yeah, we have to reintroduce all these different tools that we used to have, that countries like Austria have, or Finland, or Singapore, where they actually use the government to build out tons and tons of social housing that people can afford to live in.
Right, and instead our government is sending B-52 bombers to Venezuela. Speaking of which, what do you make of the Trump administration potentially launching Iraq 2.0 before our very eyes right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's horrendous. And, I brought up the defense bill earlier. I think it's absolutely wild that Democrats even are approving a $900 billion defense budget on the eve of a potential Iraq-like war. It's as if we don't remember what just happened with Iraq and our military interventionism all across the world. The thing is, Trump won on a policy of being non-interventionist when it comes to other countries. I mean, this was America first, right? Like, we're not going to go start bombing other countries and start other endless wars. People in America hate it. We don't want to do any more endless wars. And I think right now, the reason Trump's doing it, it's simple. It's money. It's oil. It's the big oil companies. Trump's even like saying it because Trump, in a funny way, he can't hide his intentions. He said yesterday, Venezuela has our oil and we need it back. It's very clear why they're doing this. And
Which it's not true either, by the way.
which is not true. Of course, it's not true. Venezuela doesn't have our oil. What is that? That doesn't even make sense. It also makes me think that is the kind of thing where it could be this huge distraction because Trump is completely failing on the economy. And whenever that happens, yeah, you start a war, and that's the way you stay in power. And I think Trump's seeing it as an opportunity for that. But the other piece that's like scary to me about this is if you look at the way he's starting this war, it started by him just doing these extrajudicial attacks on Venezuelan boats that are in international waters, right? So they were just bombing these boats, killing these fishermen, saying that they're drug runners, which we have no evidence that they are or aren't. And even if they were, he's not supposed to be able to do that. There's nothing allowing, any government to just do unilateral strikes, killing other people in foreign waters. But it's this expansion of executive power where Trump's just doing it and daring anybody to challenge him on it. And since no one really has, he's just able to keep moving forward. And that really scares me because his justification for doing it is he's calling them terrorists. Well, guess who he's calling terrorists? There is a national security memorandum where he's saying, Antifa are terrorists, where Antifa is defined by people who say anti-American or anti-Christian things. So this is getting to a pretty scary point. But, overall, we should absolutely be standing strong against this war. And unfortunately, I'm seeing a lot of my Democratic colleagues not even being willing to call him out on it because they also want to do regime change wars.
Yeah, and now the whole MAGA movement, they're saying it's America first for us to steal their oil so we can profit. And I want to ask you another thing about Trump's distractions. We just saw breaking news as of last night, essentially, that House Republicans decided to cancel their congressional session on Friday, move all the votes to today, and they're leaving town early, possibly due to the Epstein files deadline being on Friday. Do you think that's a coincidence, or do you think they're intentionally trying to get out of town before any type of fallout?
Oh, they're totally trying to get out of town before fallout. I mean, we saw this with the initial Epstein files vote, which was, in my opinion, one of the best examples of bipartisanship that I've seen in recent memory, where Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, they worked together to file a discharge petition to force a vote on releasing the Epstein files. And Mike Johnson delayed that vote for months, right? Because they don't want it to happen. They know what's in those files. They know Donald Trump's in there. I mean, we've seen all the pictures. And but finally, because Ro Khanna and Tom Massey just kept pushing and pushing and pushing, they broke them. And this is gonna break the MAGA base. So yeah, everyone's getting out of town before Friday because the Epstein files are about to get released. And I'm still a little skeptical about what exactly is going to come out of there because we're relying on Trump's DOJ and FBI to be putting these files out. But at the end of the day, I think they're on the run on this because this is, it's an issue that everybody agrees there's just like no it's black and white, right? If you are with Jeffrey Epstein, literally raping young women and young and like children, you should be in jail. I don't care if you're a Democrat, I don't care if you're a Republican, and that's how this should be, right? And the Republicans, unfortunately, they ran on releasing the Epstein files. MAGA, this is a big issue for MAGA, and they're realizing that the fox is in the henhouse.
I think a lot of Democrat voters want to see some real accountability, not just empty platitudes. Do you think if you win and the Democrats, help take back the House, maybe even the Senate, we can see some actual justice for some of these cabinet members who have violated the Constitution or are violating human rights, whether it's through ICE or through these war crimes in Venezuela?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, once once I win, once the Democrats take power back, I think we have to have just blind justice across the board. So what that means to me is I think the only way we get sort of faith back in our institutions is when it comes to things like the Epstein files, when it comes to things like the corruption in our government, we have to prosecute everybody who has done wrong. And that's going to be majority Republicans, but there's going to be some Democrats there too. And I think we shouldn't distinguish. It shouldn't be partisan. And I think that's the only way actually, like if we want to get people to have any sort of faith in our government and our Congress and our institutions, we have to show that these institutions are not just partisan. They're actually trying to just do right. And so that's going to be essential. And it's going to be this hard reset from the Trump administration, right? We have to kind of basically go through our own like truth and reconciliation process where we explain everything that just happened and how we can never have it happen again, how we need to restore our democracy. But yeah, I mean, like when it comes to corruption, yeah, the Republicans are bad, but I see it on both sides. I mean, we just saw Trump give Henry Cuellar a pardon for his indictments from the corruption that he's been a part of. He's a Democrat from Texas. And Hakeem Jeffries is backing that up because he's on the right side. He's on the right team. And I am, I'm on neither of those teams. I'm on the team of anybody who's been corrupt needs to go to jail.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's wrap it up by refocusing it back to San Francisco. What are the key messages you want to say to voters in the city, and what is your favorite part San Francisco?
Yeah, that's a great question. My favorite, I'll start with the second part. My favorite thing about San Francisco is it is like the city of all these micro villages. We have so many different neighborhoods that each have their distinct culture, each have their distinct history. I mean, you go to Chinatown and there's this storied history in Chinatown and the movement there and how that community and that culture has managed to keep its place. And the Mission's got its own, rich cultural history and heritage. And it's got the best of everything. You live in San Francisco, you get to live in this place that has amazing culture, amazing food, amazing all the amenities of a big city, but you have the community of a small town. And more than anything, I do believe fundamentally the reason I moved out here as fast as I could when I was growing up, I moved out when I was 23. I think San Francisco is kind of the ideal of what the country should be, because we're this place that's building the future. We innovate, we're entrepreneurial, but we also have these values of being fair and just and equal. It's this place where it doesn't matter who you come from, who you are, we accept you. And that's to me what America used to stand for. I think it's what America should stand for. And I think that's why it's so important for San Francisco to prove that that kind of a model, that kind of society can actually work. So, your first question was, what are the things I talk about to voters? I mean, the biggest crisis in San Francisco is a cost of living crisis. And you see the results of it everywhere. You see the results of inequality, the cost of housing going up. So many of my friends have gotten priced out of the city. And one thing that you see as a result of that is, folks on the street, suffering from mental health crises, from drug addiction crises, because they missed a paycheck, or they maybe had like a medical emergency and missed a rent check and end up on the streets. And the thing I try to get across when I talk to voters in San Francisco about this is all those problems, we face them hardest here, but they're not unique to San Francisco. You see versions of this cost of living crisis all across the country, and it's really downstream from these large national issues that we've spent decades ignoring. And those issues have really festered and come to a breaking point. And so I'm talking about things like the exorbitant cost of healthcare, the cost of housing, the cost of childcare. These are problems that we're going to have to solve at a national level to help San Francisco. And that's ultimately what I want to do. It's not going to be able to be done with just some small iterative reforms, which is what the Democratic Party has constantly been pushing. We're going to have to do the big structural changes. And that's what we need to do to not just, help the country, but definitely to help my city here.
Yeah, well, I want to see those big changes, and I think most Americans do, really on both sides of the political spectrum. So thanks for explaining that. Thanks for taking the time today. And yeah, it'd be amazing to do this in person with you, hopefully in the new year as the campaign starts to pick up.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks for having me on, Josh.